Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday's webinar hosted by the First Nations Health Directors Association. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territory on which we are all collectively gathered today and remind participants that are recording this webinar for those who are unable to join us. My name is Keith Marshall. I am the president of the First Nations Health Director Association, and I serve as one of the 3 regional representatives from the Central Coast. I am also the director of community health services for the Halikas Health Center Society here in Bella Bella, BC. Health directors, as we know, play an important role in the management and delivery of health services in the community, and this includes administering budgetary and management decisions. They ensure that financial managements of programs and services, including financial accountabilities and funding arrangements requirements, are met. And today we are so pleased to have with us our FNHA funding arrangement team, Tanya, Don, Toby, and Yana. And during today's sessions, they will concentrate on helping you understand your health funding arrangement terms and conditions, gaining a greater familiarity with them. And as you know, it's good to know this stuff because our funding arrangements are so important for us to be able to do the business that we do in our communities. The team will focus on frequently referred to sections such as funding provisions, insurance, evaluation, schedules, and reporting. If you haven't downloaded the 2 template documents, you can do so at FNHDA at FNHA.ca for copies. The FNHA funding arrangement team support health directors in understanding your health funding agreement and a large part of your agreement in your budget. There will be an opportunity to ask questions following the presentations. So if you could please type your questions in the chat box, we will ensure that your questions are answered. I would also like to remind the participants that we are recording this webinar so we can share it with those who are unable to join us today. So I'm looking forward to learning more about this important topic, and I will hand it over to the funding arrangement teams who will bring you this interesting webinar. And if you could take a moment to tell a little bit about yourself, team, before you get started, and I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Keith. So I'm going to show my PowerPoint first, and then we'll get into introductions there, just so I can have it up. Great. Can everybody see that? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. Great. So welcome everybody, and thanks for having us. So presentation around the health funding arrangements. We're going to be doing the health funding arrangements 101. So this is, as he said, this is going to be our final webinar series. We did a 3-part series. The first one on accountability reporting, the second one was on budgeting, and this is the last one on terms and conditions. So I just wanted to sort of introduce myself. My name is Tanya Duncan. I'm the Director of Funding Arrangements team. I've been with FNHA for about just over a year now. I'm also a First Nation I'm from Vancouver Island, from the Waiwake First Nation of Vancouver Island, and now working from home remotely on Coast Salish territory. So I just wanted to, again, thanks everybody for joining today. So a little bit more about us and the funding arrangements team, the advisory team. I have 2 teams underneath me, which is the community arrangements and partnership arrangements. Our community arrangements team is dealing directly with the health funding arrangements, and our partnerships team is dealing more with the provincial envelope, grants funding, and the joint project boards funding. So here's sort of the management team and the funding arrangements piece. So you have myself there. I also have Michael Rupison, if you're probably familiar with, who's a manager of community funding arrangements. And then I have Kelvin Vanesh, who just recently joined as the manager of partnership arrangements team. Getting into the entire team, and some of you are probably familiar with some of these faces. So here we have the community arrangements, funding arrangement advisors, and the partnership arrangement advisors. So some of them are on the call today. We have Joanne Nattrell, who's the advisor for the North. Lana Leon, who's currently on leave right now, but she was looking after Vancouver Coastal and Fraser. Audrey Henry, who's looking after Vancouver Island. Toby, who's on the call, she'll introduce herself during her presentation, who's looking after Vancouver Coastal and Fraser. Tina Manson, who's currently on leave as well, but she's looking after the set agreements and Jordan's principal agreements before. Bonnie LaBounty, who is advisor for the interior, and Dan Julian, who was helping out Joanne in the North, but now is looking at the ASOR agreements. And then we have on the partnerships team, Dawn Lee, who is also on the call. She'll do an introduction during her presentation. She's looking after the treatment centers, Indian Residential School agreements. Yana, who's also on the call, she's looking after the health actions and the joint project board. And lastly, we have Anita Finney, who's also advisor on the partnership team, looking after joint project board and the health actions piece. So that's sort of an introduction to the entire funding arrangements team. Some of you are probably familiar with those, but getting into sort of how we kind of support communities with their health funding arrangements. It's looking at the specifics of the health funding arrangement piece. As you know, the regional teams have their contribution agreements. So they have their types of agreements there. But as a community funding arrangements piece, we are basically looking at supporting the funding arrangement management of the agreement and all aspects of the renewals, extensions, and working with the health directors on those. And we also provide support and working coordination with the community development team for the community health and wellness planning. So we do a lot of connection with that team. And we also liaise with other FNHA program specialists within FNHA for support to communities of whatever they require. And then the close connection that we do have with the funding arrangements developers who are creating the agreements. We're in constant communication with that team as well. So looking at your health funding agreement, we're basically on the base funding, the regular flow of funds on your health funding agreement. As I mentioned, the region uses their contribution agreements through the regional envelope funding. Each agreement is specific to your community and developed by our funding arrangement development team. So depending on which model you have, and the team will be going through that through their presentation. If you have a set, flex, or block agreement, they'll be going through that in their presentation as well. And everything you kind of need to know about your agreement can be found in your health funding agreement and the attached schedules. And Dawn, Yana, and Toby will be going through that piece as well. When your community receives the agreement, it's important obviously to read through, kind of go do the full understanding of what is written in prior to signing. Our team of advisors, those if you're a new health director, the advisors can do a walkthrough, which we call an FA 101, is kind of the 3 sessions all in one, and the familiarity of your agreement if you need it. FNHA, so we added this, I know, with just reflecting on the past year and going through the COVID-19 piece. FNHA will continue to support First Nations through the community's communicable disease emergencies. So through preparation, planning, PPE and isolation support. So if you have any more concerns or questions specifically around COVID-19, you can go to the COVID-19 needs at FNHA.ca email for more information or any assistance required through that, and what's included in eligible PPE examples like that. So, and you can contact any of your funding arrangement advisors too if you have specific questions around that as well. So as mentioned in the beginning, we did a 3-part series sessions. The first one was the accountability and the reporting requirements within your agreement. The second one was on budgeting, looking at the funding modality in each programs and the set, the flex and the block, and the surpluses around that or deficits, for example. And today we're going to be going through the terms and conditions. So in this exercise, a little bit of better understanding of the terms and conditions within your health funding arrangements, and focusing on the funding provisions, insurance, evaluation schedules, and reporting. So those are kind of the 3-part series that we've done. And it's been a great session so far. So that's sort of the end of my presentation. And again, thank you guys for your time and attention to this. And it's been great to have these sessions as well. And I will turn it over to the 3 who are going to be presenting the terms and conditions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. I understand. I think Dawn is going to be bringing it up and showing her screen. And as soon as it comes up, I'll start. Great. Okay, I'll begin. Okay, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Tanya. And thank you for the opening remarks, FNHDA. And thank you for having us today. So good morning, everyone. My name is Toby Pascal, and welcome to our final exercise called Terms and Conditions. This is the last exercise in a series of 3. Some of you have already attended our previous 2 exercises, so thank you for coming back again. And welcome to everyone who is new joining us this morning. We understand that terms and conditions in a health funding agreement is probably one of the more drier topics to present. However, we will do our best to make this as entertaining and interesting as possible as we go through and highlight some of the terms and conditions in a health funding agreement. However, before we begin, I would like to introduce myself and some team members who will be presenting with me. As I said at the beginning here, my name is Toby Pascal, and I'm one of your funding arrangement advisors here at the First Nations Health Authority, also known as FNHA. Some of you may already know me as I work with the Vancouver Coastal and Fraser Salish communities in supporting their health funding arrangements. I've been with the FNHA for just over 16 months now. I'm First Nations from Pasqua First Nation out of Treaty 4 in Southern Saskatchewan. I've been a health director, and prior to joining FNHA, I was at the First Nations and Inuit Health Branch at Health Canada in Alberta region. So that's me. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dawn to do her introduction. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Dawn, and I have been with FNHA since the transfer. And so being in the funding arrangements team, I've been on the community-based arrangement side, and then currently, as Tanya has said, I am with the partnership arrangement side. My portfolio consists of the treatment centers, Indian residential schools, and other agreements that we hold with our external health partners. So I'm very happy to be here today, and I hope you'll be able to glean something from this presentation. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it to Yana.
Thank you, Dawn. Good morning, everybody. My name is Yana, and I am a funding advisor with the partnership unit. I've been with FNHA for just over 6 years, and my current portfolio includes health actions contribution agreements with public organizations and also JPB agreements. It is my pleasure to join this presentation on the terms and conditions. Now, prior to this presentation, you received copies of two mock-up health funding agreements. They are Clagmati J Health Services and Crimson Meadows First Nations. We will be referring to them throughout the presentation, so it will be very helpful if you have them ready. I'll give you a few moments to prepare the copies. If you don't have a copy, please let Kimberly or Karen know to send them to you. And it can also be handy to have your agreement addendum 00 on hand for comparison or reference if you like. But if you don't have it, it's okay, don't worry. And the sample agreements are just fine. I hope everybody has that copy. Now, terms and conditions. How familiar are you with the terms and conditions of your health agreement? Now, we invite you to participate in a quick exercise and test your own knowledge on the terms and conditions of your agreement. This is a self-assessment. You see the polls coming up. And it is a quick exercise to test your own knowledge of the terms and conditions. It's a self-assessment and the results are completely anonymous. On a scale 1 to 10, where 1 is minimal and 10 is very familiar, please rate your knowledge. Any number is okay. You know, we're here to learn. And you can use this pop-up box in front of you or piece of paper to put your number. We'll give you a few moments. It's a very good exercise to see where you are right now. Of course, you are welcome to share the results. As I mentioned, the answers appear on the screen anonymously. Please feel free to share. Anyone?
And don't be shy.
Thanks, Toby, for encouraging. And I'm sure you have your number in mind. And I hope now we can move on. Dawn?
Okay, so I think once the poll is closed, there may be some results that pop up, but I'm not seeing it here. So I'm going to keep talking. Oh, there's poll results. Does everybody see that?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
so
numbers.
Yeah, we have pretty high numbers there. Okay, so hopefully we can, through this presentation, we can get a little bit higher. So we'll see. All right, so thanks, Yana. So first of all, before we jump right into the terms and conditions, we thought that it would be a good idea to get to know maybe the anatomy of your health funding agreement. So oftentimes we talk about, your funding agreement, which is your very initial agreement that you have, which is addendum 00, that you usually receive upon a renewal, or if you have like a new funding relationship with FNHA. And then thereafter, with adjustments such as increases in funding, you will get what we call a funding adjustment letter, or, if there's some revisions and program activities, et cetera, you may also get one of these called funding adjustment letters. In the agreement, you may also notice that it refers out to different types of documents. So one of these supporting documents would be our funding activity structure model that you probably have seen and you can get from our external website as well. This basically diagrams the movement of funding that's eligible for each funding modality. For those of you who have been or have recently, been thinking about health planning, you may also have seen the more recently developed toolkit for health planning. So there's that refers to health plans. There's also what we call the program plan that refers to your set program funding. And so these are basically the objectives and activities that are more or less kind of just stated and pre-prescribed that is, related to your funding agreement. And finally, we have something called the Reporting Requirements Guide, and many of you may have received it through the mail before. It's a very thick document, but don't be scared of it. It's actually basically all the reporting requirements that is entirely possible to have, and some of them may not apply. And the purpose of this particular document is for you to use as a reference document. So if you forgot, let's say, what your reporting was for a certain program, you can flip to the table of contents, find the particular program, and then leaf through it to see what the reporting requirements are. So all of this is basically the package of your agreement. So I thought it'd be a good idea to just have a good visual here found out for everybody to see. Okay, so moving on. So what does your agreement actually include? So now we're looking into a little bit deeper dive of the terms and conditions. So as you see, there's many sections that pertain to your agreement. And so, we are aware of our, time here. So we are going to be focusing on mainly the highlighted ones, which are the orange ones here that we see, the funding provisions, reporting, accounting, audit requirements, evaluation, confidentiality clauses, accountability, and schedules. And how we pick this is because we noticed that these are probably the sections that you may, encounter in your day-to-day operations. So we thought it may be more relevant for us to talk about it. Having said that, it doesn't mean that the other, sections are not important. They are quite important. And so if you do have time, do take a look at it so you have kind of an image of or an impression of what these terms and conditions are. The other thing is that, is the very point of not needing to memorize these, right? There are a lot of legal wording there, and so it would be really difficult to have a, camera memory of all of this stuff. But that is why, do keep your addendum 00 handy, because that is the only copy with the full terms and conditions listed. The FALs won't have all the full terms and conditions. It only just speaks to the original document, original amendment that you have, which is addendum 00. So do have your addendum 00 handy when you are doing maybe some work, let's say reporting, etc. Maybe good to have as a reference. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so I believe we'll pass it to Toby.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. Okay, on this slide here, we've highlighted some important sections that we would like you to note. We have 5 columns here. We have funding provisions, insurance, evaluation, reporting, and scheduling. So first of all, we'll go into what is a funding provision? Well, a provision, first of all, is a stipulation within your health funding agreement. And often a provision requires an action by a specific date or within a specific time period. And a provision could also be a budget, right? So, if you look at your agreement, you might have Aboriginal diabetes, or you might have CPNP, and you might have, the provision might be to carry out this program with X amount of dollars. That's a provision. Or a provision of time might be, you're going to have a project that's going to happen during the summer, and it must happen before October or before winter sets in. So a provision in a health funding arrangement kind of guides you on the delivery of your programs and services within that health funding agreement. So it sets the stage in terms of the dollar amount and activities to be carried out. Okay, so it's very important, your funding provisions. The second column I want to bring your attention to is insurance. Insurance must be purchased and maintained in regards to the following: of course, the general public and comprehensive liability insurance, and a minimum of $5 million must be purchased. And it's to protect your staff and your community members. And it's a protection against any errors or omissions. So you have liability insurance for your professional staff coming in and any health services or programs being delivered. So it's very important to have the insurance. And it does say here, with having insurance, and more specifically liability insurance, you're protecting not only your health center, but you're protecting everybody, your community members. So just wanted to highlight the insurance, why it's important, because a lot of times people think, you know, in our day-to-day lives, we think of insurance in terms of vehicle insurance or fire for our buildings and theft and stuff, but this is liability. This is insurance with the delivery of services by a professional. So that's why it's important to have that liability, $5 million. Okay, so the third column here is the evaluation. Now, some of you already have block agreements and some of you may have a flex agreement. Well, if you have a block and a flex, you already know that an evaluation is something that must be done on a regular basis, I believe every 5 years. So sometimes, so every 5 years, yeah, you got to do an evaluation if you have a flex and a block. But if you have a set agreement, it's not mandatory that you have to do an evaluation. But what's important to highlight about an evaluation is evaluations are good. They're always good. Whether an event happened or didn't happen, or whether something happened or an activity happened that didn't go as planned, highlight that, document that. It's important to capture what happened, good or bad. And this improves us for years down the road because we can see what worked and what didn't work. You know, so it's important to evaluate after every project and after every program. And in this case, you're going to be evaluating every 5 years for you're evaluating against your community health and wellness plan. So you'll have your community health and wellness plan, and you're looking at that to say, did we actually do what we said we were going to do? And if there was any deviations, you would highlight those changes, and then, you know, you carry on. So it's just evaluate, documenting, and updating your community health and wellness plan. So it's very important. One thing I want to highlight here is the 7 years. It is very important that as health directors and you're keeping your data and documentation and your reporting, keep it, hold it somewhere for 7 years. I know we're living in an electronic world, so a lot of us we have e-files. So somehow we have to secure our data. Just in the event, keeping that documentation is very good for history. It's good for new health directors coming on board, say 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, they can read and see what happened prior to them coming on board. And they can also read what worked and what didn't work. So it's important to keep all documentation for a minimum of 7 years. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight those 3 columns. And now I'll pass it over to Yana. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Toby. Thank you. Here I would like to add that reporting and schedules inform and complement one another. For example, Schedule 3 provides a summary of all reporting. And we will go over them and those sections in the presentation a bit later. Thank you. Dawn?
Thank you. All right, so now it brings us to the more practical side. So here again is where it's important for you to have those mock sample agreements out. That's specifically Clemati J and Crimson Meadows. So we will be referring heavily back and forth to those. So we do highly recommend that you can have it somewhere handy. It may mean that you have to switch between screens, but not to worry. You know, if you do need to just focus on those documents, you can feel free to do that because what we have on the presentation slide would not change very much as we're talking and going through the particular question. So also, you may also see that for the purpose of the exercise, we focused on set and block. And this isn't, you know, by any means to neglect, you know, the importance of the flex agreement. We know there was, you know, limited time. So we picked this because set and block are the most different from one another. And whatever the block has in their terms and conditions, it also, you know, it also has what flex has, but a little bit more. So what you see in the block, you will also see an overlap with the flexible. So hopefully we are able to cover it off, but we will be, you know, talking a little bit towards the flex because I know many of us are also in a flex agreement. Also, just to note, we will be sending out an FAQ as well, just because we know we have limited time here today in the presentation. And we will also be sending out our answer keys to these practice exercises. So hopefully, you know, it doesn't cause too much concerns. If something you misheard or anything like that, you can always go back and refer to it. So just as an overview, we have about 45 questions. So we'll play it by ear depending on how much time we have. So we have two, the first two is to help you gain a little bit further familiarity with the terms and conditions within your health funding agreement. And then the latter two are a little bit more hands-on practice to help you apply what you've learned. And then we have final question, which is more of a food for thought question to kind of help you summarize knowledge you're learning. So if time allows, we'll also go over that one together as a group. But if not, it's something that you can kind of use for your own temperature check. Okay, so again, have those documents open for yourself. Okay, so question number 1. Where would you find information on funding provisions, insurance schedules, reporting, and evaluation in your health funding agreement? So in this case, you can look at phone if you have that handy, but if not, you can look at the FNHDA and Crimson Meadows documents, mock documents. So we'll give you a little bit of time to look at where those are, and if you like, you can feel free to let us know where those page numbers are. And I think Kimberly or Karen will be able to mute everyone for this part of the presentation. So I believe everyone is able to talk. Is that right, Kimberly, Karen?
Correct, Dawn.
Yep, okay. So just take a look at the agreement and see where those page numbers are. So it's really quiet so far.
I've been timing and we've got 30 seconds left.
Okay, so any takers on where these sections are located?
Let's start with funding provisions, for example.
Anyone see, where funding provisions will be located in Crimson Meadows or FNHDA? Just page numbers. This is the active part of the exercise. So anyone, any takers? I don't really see anything in the chat either. So if you want to type in, you can type in the chat as well. If that's easier. Okay, so shall we go over? So was everyone able to find the funding provisions in Crimson Meadows? Ooh, I have a chat. Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Page 6 for provisions for, I believe, Crimson. Has anyone seen one for FNHDA? FNHDA. So specifically, there's sections 6 to 10. You'll see that a lot of information on funding provisions. And if you look to FNHDA, the similar corresponding section would be on page, anyone know?
Page 7.
Yes, page 7. I don't know who said that, but thank you. It is page 7. So from page 7 to 10, you'll see some sections there talking about funding provisions. And you'll notice that this section actually talks a little bit about, your grand total amount of your agreement, right? How FNHA allocates and amends funding annually, ad hoc, they do this through funding agreement pages, through the funding adjustment letters, right? Information on pre-agreement documents. So your program funding and surplus usage or flexibilities or eligibilities as they pertain to your health funding agreement or program funding model. And then also, as you read that section, might be a good idea to even look at the health funding model structure that we showed earlier in the presentation. So I'm going to paste that link in the chat just because it's oftentimes we hear about concerns not being able to see the print nicely. So this one you can open up in your own desktop or laptop and blow it up as much as you like. So that's the corresponding part. What about the insurance piece? Where does the insurance section occur in either Crimson Meadows or Clydmati J?
Page 17.
Yep, page 17, and that's with which community?
Liabilities and the indemnification.
Right, yes, it's a tricky word to say. So yes, under page 17 of Clydmati J, there is the that section on liabilities. What about for Crimson, the set community we have?
14.
Yeah, 14 to 15, yeah, around that area we have similar, and you'll see that it talks a little bit about the amount that you are expected to have for coverage, so at least 5 million. And this is very important, for business wise, to cover yourself if there's anything that happens, damage claims, etc., legal liabilities, bodily injury, right? So a very important section to be mindful of as you do your business operations. Okay, moving on, schedules. So this may be something that you've seen a lot, but where would you find the schedules in our sample documents? So each for Crimson Meadows and Clydmati J.
In the Crimson, we have schedule 1, 2, 3, and 4 in pages 29 to 34.
Mm-hmm. Right. So on the blue pages would be 31 to 35 of the actual blue pages, maybe. So what about Clydmati? Oh, 29 to 35, sorry. Blue pages 29 to 35. And what about Clydmati? Do we see where the corresponding sections are for those?
33 to 40, is that what we're talking about?
Yes, that's what we're talking about, 33 to 40. We're making you guys work, eh? Yeah, so this is the sections where we see schedules. So you'll see that there's schedules 1 and 2, which pertains to program funding schedules, basically, so cash flow and budget. And then schedules 3 and 4 is more of program reporting, right? So you'll see, the third one is just programs that you may need to report on, and 4 is more on the core programs. And then in the block, if you look at Clydmati J, you'll also see schedule 5, which speaks to dispute resolution process. And it only appears for for agreement holders who have a collective. So in Clydmati J, we wanted to show that there as well. Okay, so let's move on. You guys are very speedy in this. So let's go to reporting. Where do we find reporting in these 2 agreements? And they may occur in several sections. But, shout out. Oh, page 11, yep, there's reporting. So 9 to 11 for Crimson. You may also see page 16, there's a little bit on reporting, related to reporting. There's also, I think for Clydmati, it's around the same page as well. Clydmati J for block 11 to 13. And if you leave through, 19 to 20 also has a little bit on reporting. And page 35 to 39, you'll also see something related to reporting. So right here, we also have for Crimson Meadows, we have 31 to 35 and page 16. So as you look at it and skim through it, you may notice that there's subsections called reporting to FNHA, schedules 3 and 4, like we said before, and then also a subsection regarding representation and warranties, system of accountability to the members and accountability to members. So you'll see that there's actually some reporting to FNHA, right? And then there's some reporting to your own community members as well. So it's kind of a two-part type of reporting expectations that are kind of noted in our terms and conditions here. And so again, you know, that those are things to keep in mind when you are, you know, operating and implementing the agreement. Now, finally, there's evaluations. So where do people see the section for evaluation?
Page
15.
Okay, so I hear both 13 and yeah, 15, right? So I guess page ranges 11 to 13 and page 13 to 16. You'll see some information on the evaluation. So again, it talks to a little bit about the accountability to your own members as well as accountability to FNHA. So there's accounting audit requirements, right, that we use for evaluation of, let's say, your financials, of how programs are going. There's also a particular evaluation section, which outlines, again, the expectation that the agreement holder will have a system of record keeping and to keep it for 7 years, just in case there's anything that, you know, we had questions on, we as FNHA had questions on, that we can go back and go look at it. And so I know it's a long time, but sometimes, you know, we do have things that come up that are a very long time ago, and we need to look at the history of it. Again, there's also that other piece of expectation of reporting to your own community members or your own health services organization. And so it's a little bit of a self-evaluation of your own work. So you will see in the block, so not in the crimson, you'll see that it's not in the crimson, it's missing, but in the block, or if your own flex agreement, if you have it, you'll see a subsection that talks about plans, right? And this is referring to the health and wellness planning that's been, you know, that is expected if you were in a flex or block agreement. So, you know, expectations on maybe revising it and using it like a evergreen document as it relates to the current health needs and priorities of your community or organization. Yeah, I heard something. Yes. Okay, maybe that's just some background noise. Okay, and then there's also a section that outlines, you know, the block agreement holders, especially so in Climati J, you'll see that there's an expectation of doing an evaluation plan every 5 years, and an evaluation report. So just wanted to flag those for you. So if you do have any questions, you can type it into the chat, but I will move on. So hopefully everyone has a little bit more experience in navigating the terms and conditions, and you'll see this answer key or answers in your answer key when we send it out to you. Okay, so now it comes to question number 2. So what are the differences in the terms and conditions among the set and block health funding agreements? And we put flex in brackets because we will speak to it, but for the purposes of the exercise, we gave mock agreements on set and block. And I think a really good tip for this particular question is to look at the table of contents. Just going to give everyone a little bit of time to compare and contrast what you see similar and what is, you know, maybe very different.
I'll put the timer on for 1 minute.
And if you do notice any difference, just, you know, shout it out if you want, enter it into the chat, whatever works for you. We hope that this active participation is helping a little bit in helping you become familiar with your terms and conditions.
Any more seconds?
Any takers on what you see different? Very quiet all of a sudden. Anyone?
Been a minute now.
Okay, so maybe you'll notice that there's lots of similarities, but there are some differences. I'm gonna pull this up.
There's a pretty big difference between set funding and block funding. The block funding, you actually get to keep your funds if you don't use them all. But the set funding, you have to report it and give it back.
Or ask for approval, right? Depending on the set funding, or ask for approval to have it carry forward. That is very true. Thank you. I don't know who said it, but thank you for your participation.
Jonathan.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. Yes, so here it was, we thought it would be really helpful to have a little bit of visual, so we tried to color code it, so it's very colorful. But how do you read this chart? And you'll find this also in your answer. But we kind of looked at, okay, so everything that the set has, the flex and block also has, right? So everything in this pink, orangey, salmon color, you'll see all the terms and conditions that pertain to set. And it's a very long table. So I'm just going to scroll down for you to see. So there's lots of terms and conditions. And how to read this chart is, in addition to all set health funding agreements, terms and conditions, the following are also found in flexible health funding agreements. So everything here, plus these little bits that we add here in the blue, makes the complete set of flex terms and conditions, flex agreement terms and conditions. And then also, I don't want to make anyone dizzy by moving too much, but also in the block, you'll also find that in addition to all flexible health funding agreement terms and conditions, the following are also found in block health funding agreements. So what you'll find here is that everything for the set and flexible applies, plus these other ones that maybe noted differences or just added parts that pertain to the block agreement. I'm just going to give a big scroll down here. So there are just a few differences, more similarities for sure than differences, but there are some differences. And Jonathan has noted one of the biggest ones, which is the flexibility of funding, which segues to here, right? So you'll find that there's differences in the way that you can move around funding for flex and block agreement versus the set agreement. And I think if those of you who have participated in our second part of our webinar on budgeting, they go in a little bit more in depth than that. So if you want to know a little bit more, I would highly recommend you to view that presentation if you weren't able to participate in it. Here, I'm going to pull up just a little bit because I think the diagram also really helps to look at the flexibilities. If I can get it to pull up here, and I hope it shows well. It's big enough. Always a concern. But just, in the flex, what it basically means is that you can only do maybe what we call vertical reallocations, right? So if you have, let's say, if you're in a set funding and you have some programs under health child development, and if you have, some funds that you want to move around, you can only move around within, the programs that are within this particular column. But if you're in a flex, what the funding provisions basically say is that you can move, anything, all the programs that are under primary health care within themselves, right? But you can't, put any primary health care dollars into, let's say, health infrastructure, because that's kind of where the limit is in terms of the funding flexibility in reallocation of funding. And certainly you can't also go in and put health funding infrastructure dollars into supplementary health benefits. But for block, you can move around freely. So you can go, you see this orange perimeter here? It basically says, you know, you can move it around if your programs are under the block funding modality. So just a very brief overview of that. But if you do want more detail, again, our second section of our webinar does talk more in detail on this. Okay, so basically you'll notice as you read through those sections that there are different surplus reinvestment eligibilities as well. And the flexible clauses of the surplus eligibilities resemble the ones in the block. So they share the same, but are quite different, like Jonathan said, in the set, in which case you may need a written approval to carry forward anything. Okay, moving on, we also see in plans. So plans, you'll see that particularly in the flex and the block, you'll see a subsection on plans, which we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, which refers to updating of your community health and wellness plans and maybe even having one, right? So the block also has this, but also you'll find in the block that's not in the flexible agreement is an evaluation part, which is the section which we talked about, needing to do an evaluation plan and report every 5 years. And also in the block, if you look between the table of contents of the set agreement in Crimson and the block agreement in Clonmady, you'll see that there's this little thing called movable asset reserve, little section here in block agreement, and it doesn't show in flex or set. So just wanted to highlight that. And again, I think very early on, I talked about Schedule 5, right? So Schedule 5 and opting out provision, they're kind of related. So opting out provision, you will see that it's not in the set. I believe it's because in the set agreement, as far as I know, there's no collective in the set agreement, but we do have some collectives for, you know, in flexible agreements and block agreements. So if you are in a collective, in which case multiple member communities under one agreement, you'll see this opting out provision clause there, but you don't see it in the set. Finally, Schedule 5 dispute resolution also appears in the block agreement. Okay, and so those are the differences. I hope it kind of helps give you a brief, in a nutshell, kind of view of what are different and similar between all of these agreements. So definitely more similarities than differences. But now hopefully you feel a little bit wiser around the things that separate these funding agreements. Okay, so with that, I've been doing a lot of talking. I'm going to pass it on to Yana.
Thank you, Dawn. Now question 3. This question is about one of the hottest topics, and we all know it's reporting, of course. And the truth is that everything you need is already in the agreement, and it's just a matter of knowing where to look for it. And the following scenario will help you refresh your knowledge and will give you an opportunity to practice. So imagine that you are currently the new health director of Crimson Meadows, First Nations, or Clonmady J Health Services. You're wondering about your health funding agreement reporting requirements, but your funding arrangement advisor is on annual vacation. That happens. In the absence of your funding arrangement advisor, how would you find out what reporting is due by looking at your health funding agreement? That's a question. I will give you a few moments here to look over the agreements again. A good place to start, as Dawn mentioned before, is your table of contents. We already looked through the agreements in a few previous exercises, so I hope now it's a bit easier for you to navigate. So I'll
Schedule 3.
Okay, we'll start. Where can we look? What page is Schedule 3? Very good.
31.
Page 31 in the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is it?
Yeah.
The Crimson
Page
Meadows.
31 of the Crimson Meadows, yeah.
Awesome. Yes, very good. What about Clonmady J? Schedule 3, Clade J, summary of reporting requirements. Which page? This is a wonderful exercise just to go through that agreement and familiarizing yourself.
Page 35.
Very good, correct answer. And the section reporting to FNHA. It's maybe someone can tell me what page it's on for Crimson Meadows. Just the very first reporting to FNHA, Crimson Meadows, what page? Once you know that, you know everything. I'll give you a hint. It's page 11. Page 11 in Crimson Meadows, but now you can tell me for Clade J, what page reporting to FNHA, where does it start? Do you need a hint?
12.
It's page 12. Maybe you can open it right now and take a look. So it gets so much easier to look through the agreements. And now if you don't have a copy of the agreement, please refer to your community's finance or administration office. Do we have any questions on this one? And if not, then we can move on. Toby? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Yana. And thanks everyone for your participation in the chat. During these exercises, we can see lots of activity. So it's great to see everybody participating. So thank you for that. So I have question number 4 here, and it's a scenario type of question. So, and this is something that might be common or might be coming up right now. So with the recent pandemic, health needs in your community have changed. You have been hearing from community members that they would like to do a mask making group. You have some surplus in your First Nations health benefits medical transportation program, and you are hoping to use this surplus to create a mask making group. How can you find out if your health funding arrangement supports this? So looking for feedback here. I'm going to take a minute and have a look at those 2 agreements or your own agreement and look for the First Nations Health Benefits Medical Transportation Program. And do you think if you had a surplus, are you able to use it for a mask making project?
Hi, Toby. Can somebody move the slide ahead to question 4?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Dawn? Oh, there we go. Thanks. Okay. Any suggestions? Anybody out there?
I would say
Medical
no
trans-
to the health benefits because that's a set funding.
Good answer. You're absolutely right. And you know what? You hit it on the nose. When it's in set, when you're looking at your whole overall agreement, anything under set must be spent according to that line number. So if it's First Nations medical health transportation, it must be spent on medical transportation. However, not to say that this is not a fantastic idea. This is a great idea. And we want to bring community people together. We want to bring communities, our community together to make different things happen. So where can we actually look for something like this for surplus? There's surplus, maybe another program. Does anybody have an idea of where you would look for, if you were wanting to do a mask making group in your community, where would you possibly think maybe you could look for funding to come from? I see someone in the chat wrote Brighter Futures, mental health, absolutely. You hit it on the nose there, absolutely. It's Brighter Futures, mental health. When you're bringing community together, you can also look under your Aboriginal diabetes program. And the reason why I say that is a lot of times when we bring community together, we bring food. And when we bring food, we bring healthy food. So Aboriginal diabetes program promotes healthy eating, nutrition, mental health, promotes, getting together. It's all those programs. So if you look at your Brighter Futures component, look at the children and youth programs. And if there's surpluses there, those are really great areas to pull for this type of activity for the mask making group. So it's a win-win in all areas. So I'm just going to check if there's another comment and No, it's all good. So anybody else have any feedback on question number 4? So it's something that we want to encourage. Yes, you can do it. It's just looking outside of the set. All surpluses and sets cannot be spent anywhere but what it says in the set. So always look in the flex and the block portions of your agreement for surpluses for this type of activities. Okay, so that's question number 4. And if there are no further questions, we'll go to question number 5. Okay, so we'll go to the next question here. And I'll get Dawn to move it up to question 5. It's now, it's kind of like a self-reflection. At the beginning, we asked you in your own words, can you now briefly explain, anybody out there, what is funding provisions or insurance, evaluation, schedules, and reporting? So do we have any takers out there that someone can, and you don't have to define all 5 of those. If you could just, if you could answer to one of them in your own words, what you think evaluation is, or what you think insurance is, or provisions, that would be great. Nobody wants the takers out there?
We have a response from Arlene in chat.
Okay, I'll have a little look here. Our annual reports. Our annual reports. I'm not understanding that question, the response. So is this, we're just wanting to see if you understand funding provisions, insurance, evaluation, and schedules and reporting. Kind of the definition we're looking for. I know your annual report will have, your annual report includes a report on what's happening in your community in terms of health service delivery. But in terms of this here, can anybody say what funding provisions are?
Essentially, isn't that just in summary, it's just what FNHA is agreeing to pay in terms of dollar amount and structure of that. So I think because sometimes it's divvied out different times of the year, but generally speaking, it's what FNHA is committed to provide to the community as far as funding. Good
answer, Jonathan. And you're absolutely right. It's the commitment, not only on FNHA, it's the commitment on the community side to deliver that program and service as well. So you're absolutely right. Funding provisions kind of stipulate your guidelines, what you can work within in terms of your budget amount, in terms of timelines and what events are going to take place. Yeah. So good answer on that one. Okay. I think everybody has a good sense of what insurance and evaluation are. What about schedules and reporting? And the reason why I'm bringing this up again is because sometimes, does everybody know what a schedule is? When you think of schedules, what do you first comes to mind? Any suggestors out there when you think of a schedule? I see in chat somebody put provisions as our programs and our work plan. Absolutely. That's dead on. Yeah. And what about a schedule? What's a schedule? When you think of schedules, do you think of a class schedule or do you think of a work schedule? In terms of FNHA, when we use the word schedules, it always pertains to normally 199% of the time, financial schedule. So if you ever hear one of us saying, we're looking for the schedule for medical transportation, that's what we're looking for, is just an expenditure, the financial schedule for medical transportation. So yes, so it says here, schedule our funding, what it looks like. Yeah, good answers in the chat. So thank you everybody for your participation in question number 5. Go down to the next, and the next exercise, I'll pass it over to Yana. Thank you.
We'll have the next slide. So here we are. We reviewed the most commonly asked questions about terms and conditions of your health funding agreements. And we could tell that you are wonderful students, great participation. Once again, we would like to invite you to rate yourself and rate your familiarity with the agreement, once again, on a scale 1 to 10. We hope that your number went up, and perhaps navigating the agreement for specific sections is just a bit easier now. Let's see some numbers. We had great numbers to start with, so we can only go higher. Don't worry if it stays the same. We're here to learn. Give you a few more moments.
And maybe sometimes it goes lower because the more you learn, the more you feel like, you know, you don't know and you want to know
That's
more.
right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
Thank
we
you for
invite you for your honesty.
And thanks again for participation.
So I think,
Compliments. And we will, okay, thank you. Okay,
all right. So we got a poll.
wonderful.
I
Wow.
think I can see this. Yeah. I think
Thank
everyone-
you. Now back to Dawn.
Wow, we have some 9s, which is good. Okay. So thanks everyone for participating again. So in closing, we really hope the number was a bit higher for you, but it feels like it's almost the same or even lower. It's okay because we know that this is a lot of information, it really is, and it may take some time to digest and just feel, you know, a little more familiar. That's, you know, has a lot of words in them. But we really do thank you for diving in with us and coming through all the legal wording. It isn't, we know it isn't your typical, you know, adventure novel or science fiction page turner. So we understand that, but we do hope that you were able to glean something from this. And while we're closing here, this isn't the only time that we will be talking about this. If you do have any, you know, further questions, you can reach out to us. Here or even your respective funding arrangements arrangements advisor. So do, you know, let us know if you do want to talk more about it. And we hope, you know, you were able to gain some clarity around some of the things that you may be wondering about. And that it opened doors for some dialogue, if anything. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to Tanya to help us close for our presentation today.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody, and thanks to Dawn, Yana, and Toby for their presentation. So it's been a pleasure and honor being with all of you today. So thank you for your time and attention. I hope the presentation provided some guidance and assistance to your work. If anyone would like
Can't quite hear you, Tanya.
I think she froze.
Oh, she froze.
Then
Oh, we lost Tanya. Maybe
Oh, I think she might be back.
I give her a second to come back, but yeah. Thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate you all participating on our third session. For some of you, we know it's been 3 long sessions when you take it all together. So thank you for your patience and for attending. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Hello, I'm
you.
back.
Anna is back.
Okay, I don't know how many, what you guys heard. Did you hear anything I said or no?
Just a bit and then you froze.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining today and allowing us to present and having your time and attention to the presentation. And if anybody has any questions related to the presentations, any of the team members within funding arrangements are here to help you. And again, thank you to FNHDA. So Gaya Klasta, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining today. So I turn it back over to Keith and Karen. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tanya. And yeah, just on behalf of FNHDA, I really want to thank you and your team for providing this information. Funding arrangements are sometimes a difficult child to handle, and it's good that the more information we have, the better we're prepared to ensure that we have the appropriate level of funding to do the jobs that we do. I also want to thank all of those who called in and participated in this this webinar, and I hope that the information that was presented was helpful to each and every one of you. We will be taking a short recess from hosting webinars for the month of May, but we'll be back again in June. So if you have any suggestions or ideas that you would like to see in our webinars, you can email them at fnhda.fnha.ca, give Kimberly or Karen a call, and they'll be more than happy to get them arranged. So wishing everybody a great day, and stay safe, stay well, and hopefully we will go to restaurants soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Uh,